Just for the record, we had a response from Commissioner Manuel that he could make the meeting. As you may or may not know, we have dealt with his father late last week. I called his cell and I couldn't get him, his office was closed. So that could have something to do with why he didn't make it. We already knew that Commissioner Woodruff couldn't make it today. Talked to Commissioner Shroud last week. He was on the mountain in Colorado. We expected he would get back. With that having been said, we need to move ahead and transact business. So I'm going to ask, hopefully Commissioner Manuel will show up, but we need to elect a temporary chair for this meeting. So the floor is now open for nominations for temporary chair.
I nominate Francine, since she does have seniority for chair.
I second that.
Okay.
Thank you, I didn't know all this lady around here. Just call
So,
me in and all the ladies.
since there are only three members, and I don't think you're going to vote against yourself, congratulations, ma'am. You're our temporary chair.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And roll call,
Since I think I'm acting as the ED for the moment.
okay, you can do that.
Second, well, I don't know, you want to call?
She could, if she has the list of names.
Madam Clerk, you want to call on the second?
Commissioner,
Deputy City Clerk Sandra Kirby, roll call for the Brooksville Housing Authority meeting on July 16th. Eric Slakovich,
Present.
thank you. Francine Ward,
Present.
Barry Mindel,
You got it. Here, present.
and Rick Gilmore.
Yeah, I'm not a commissioner, but I'm here, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, go ahead.
Yes, we have a presentation today, and I know you gave me your name, but if you want to.
Cereta.
Excuse me,
Did-
Commissioner Manuel says he's about 15 minutes away, if I need him. So when he say, yeah, we need him. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, if you would like, you wanna go ahead with the presentation, or did you wanna wait for it?
No, I think we need to let him.
Okay, because we've got quite a bit to do. So if you would like to go ahead and come to the microphone, introduce yourselves to us.
hello. Hi, good afternoon.
I think we should be able to turn that around, because I'm the only one holding down this end. We might
Oh,
have to
okay.
address that. And while we're waiting, let the record reflect that Donnie Singer from the Fernando County Housing Authority is with us.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Cereta Gibbons. I am the owner for a grant writing firm in Tampa, Florida called Comprehensive Grants Management. We have been in operation for a little over 12 years. And I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to present on this. Oh. Okay. No, over here. I'll just start over. Hi, my name is Cereta Gibbons. I'm the owner for Comprehensive Grants Management. Comprehensive Grants Management has been in operation for a little over 12 years. we are a grant writing firm with 7 full-time staff members, all dedicated to the task of bringing additional funding to public housing authorities all across the United States of America. And we have done so successfully for the last 12 years, like I stated. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to the Brooksville Housing Authority on the Section 202 grant. And it's called the Section 202 Supportive Housing for the Elderly. So this is a grant funding opportunity that HUD shelved for almost 10 years now. So the last time an applicant was awarded this grant was in 2011. They have resurrected it to respond to the affordable housing shortage that the entire nation is facing today. So what this grant does, it makes it possible to provide affordable housing for low-income elderly and provide them with affordable housing. So the elderly is defined for this grant program as 62 years old and older. So for this funding opportunity, an eligible applicant can request up to $5 million. So an eligible applicant is defined as a nonprofit organization with their 501c3, a letter from the IRS, or their 501c4 letter from the IRS, or they can be a consumer cooperative. So there are only 3 eligible applicant types. So the $5 million that you can request up to doesn't mean you have to request the entire $5 million. You can request any number below that up to $5 million. So the $5 million you spend on 10% of a development cost. So remember, the development is a multi-family development that you will use to house elderly persons, and elderly are over the age of 62 years old. So you can buy land and build, you can buy a development outright, you can already have a development and you're renovating it, rehabilitating it, reconstructing it, or you buy a development and you renovate it, reconstruct it. So you can do any variation thereof to achieve a functioning multi-family development that you use to serve the elderly residents. You can only have a minimum of 5 units, because that's the definition of multi-family. You cannot have less than 5 units, and you can go up to as many as you want. So the up to 5 million you use for up to 10% of your development costs. Remember, you can buy, build, renovate, rehabilitate, reconstruct. The other 90%, HUD wants you to find other funding sources. So you can use contribution from your local government, you can use other grant funding, you can use a 9% low-income housing tax credit, you can use a 4% low-income housing tax credit, you could do a bank mortgage, you could do contribution, you could be as creative as you want to be. You could have a wealthy billionaire just give you the other 90%. So they want you to fund it with other sources. So once you have your purchase completed, the most lucrative part of this actual grant is the PRAC, because there is a beginning part where you get the up to $5 million that will contribute to 10% of your development costs. They call that the capital advance portion of the grant. Now, after you have the building in operation, HUD will enter into this agreement called the PRAC, the Project-Based Rental Assistant contract with you. What that means is that for your area, they have an operating cost schedule, and they will give you, HUD will, 75% of the operating cost for your building per year. So The only amount you really need to account for is 25% of the operating cost. And HUD mentions that you can use the residents' contributions to their rent. However, after 3 years, if you find that the 75% that they're contributing, giving to you for the operating is not really covering, you know, the 75%, they will renegotiate with you for a larger amount, but they'll do that after 5 years. So this grant is due August the 28th, and HUD has allocated $50 million for the entire country. So they're putting quite a lot of funding behind this grant program to address the shortage that we're having today. In addition to that, HUD says that they'll come out with another grant announcement next year where they'll put out another $110 million of available funding for this grant program. So there's a lot of money out there. That's HUD's way of addressing the affordable housing shortage, and it gives housing authorities, the nonprofit of the housing authority or other nonprofits in the community, 501c3, 501c4s, consumer cooperatives. It gives you the opportunity to work with your community stakeholders and go after this grant funding, and also go after that very lucrative PRAC contract that will take care of 75% of the operating. So that's my brief overview for you. Are there any questions?
So the 75%, that's the first 3 years? Or 5, and then when you go?
That's a very good question. So the 75% will be up to 40%, 40 years. Because in order for this to be a non-payment loan, because the original capital advance is a non-payable loan, you have to designate the development for elderly persons for the next 40 years. That is a commitment that you must designate this development for the next 40 years. So they will continue to fund you at the 75% based on your area's operating schedule for the next 40 years.
Oh, I thought you just said it was for 4 years, but it's actually
40 years. Yes, you have to designate it.
Standard with federal money. If you do any kind of acquisition, renovation, or construction,
Yeah.
that's standard to have a very long term
Very
commitment.
long contract.
Yeah, very long term commitment.
The 3 years is, after 3 years, they will assess you because you would have had a 3-year track record. And if that 75% is not covering the 75% of your operating, it's probably just covering 60 or, 60, which is a lesser amount, they will increase their contributions.
that just gives us some time to get everything working well, to make it work, and just make a success.
Definitely.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Commissioners first. Any more questions right now?
Another question regarding the, I guess the 60, because many people of different age groups, is that if they're a couple, at least one member has to be 62, and her husband's 55, or that would qualify to couple?
Yes, so at least one family member, the head of household, would have to be a minimum of 62 years old. Now, the only eligible unit types are efficiencies and 1-bedrooms. Efficiencies cannot be larger than 500 square foot, and 1-bedrooms cannot be larger than 700 square foot of space, and that's under roof livable space. So those are the limitations in the spaces. Now, a question would be, what if you're buying a development and the current size of the units are larger than that? So what HUD has said is that you have to pay with non-202 funds for the additional space. So you have to fund it from other means. but they will only pay for the value of the space up to the 500 square foot for the efficiencies, and up to the 700 square foot for the 1 bedrooms. Now, you can have 2 bedrooms, but the 2 bedrooms cannot be larger than a 1 bedroom, which is 700 square foot.
There's an awful lot of information I need to digest.
Well, the biggest thing is you're looking at a 90% match.
Yes,
I mean, that's the huge thing, and you're looking at all this deadline.
you're looking for that 90% contribution, but the most lucrative part of it is that 75% operating. Because if you just had a building and you had to go out there and have residents pay their rents to contribute, who knows what's going to happen. But the guaranteed funding from HUD for that 75%, that's extremely lucrative.
But you've got to have that 90% in order to get the building.
You have to have that
Either
90%.
constructed or renovated, whatever.
So, you could get a partnership from the city, the county, because they know that the area is experiencing a shortage of housing. And especially seniors are a very disadvantaged group. So they too are purposeful in making sure that housing is provided. So if they have that agenda, they also have that goal, they can marry up with other organizations that have that agenda and goal and make it possible. So you can do a mortgage from the local bank, you can do 9% low income tax credit, 4% low income tax credit, other grant funding, your own operating budget if you have reserves. You could do other grants, you know, you can be as creative as you want to be. Investors can contribute.
Would, since we already just sold property with the funds that we have, would that be,
Sure.
I'll address that when the.
that's the same, since you're saying that the funding we have, some, you know.
Absolutely.
Any other commissioners right now?
Go ahead.
Okay, 2 or 3 things. Number one, thank you for the presentation. Since we don't know any billionaires, that's the problem.
I can.
Well, excuse me, then maybe you can get funded. I'll speak for myself, since I don't know any personally. I'll call both of what you won't call me back. There's a couple of moving parts here that cause some difficulty. Number one, the housing authority itself, which we talked about, could not apply for this. Because the housing authority is a 501c1 entity, not a 501c3 or 501c4. The difference is that designation is automatic because we're not for profit governmental entity. We don't get the vaulted, what they want to see, determination letter from the IRS, right on cue, right on cue. The vaulted determination letter from the IRS. So even if we wanted to look at this at this juncture, we would have to partner with someone because we have just sold property, but we haven't moved far enough down the road in the past few years to potentially have a captive 501c3 that the housing authority has for these type purposes. I see that potentially in the future, but we don't have it, and probably could not get that before August 28th. So number one, that's why we would potentially have to partner with someone, and you said the city or whoever, which would be a possibility, but given the time frame. Number two, I want you to hear the presentation from my standpoint because of what you said. There's $50 million available this year. There's projected $100 and some odd million next year. We have a problem. We have money, not $1 billion. We have money. So this may be something to consider in our toolbox looking into the next phase. Now, one thing we haven't heard about yet is, number one, who owns the property now? Number two, the name of the property, how many units and what condition it's in. So that would be my question.
And you're talking about 200 drive-in,
I'm talking about Brooksville.
oh, Brooksville.
But I'm
So,
talking about Brooksville because that's what you said in the email.
yes, so Brooksville is an option. And so you can look throughout the community for many different options. There are probably landlords right now wanting, desperately needing to sell, they probably just have not advertised. So you can put feelers out there to figure out what is the best possible development for you. So Brooks Villas, to my mind, it's 66 units, and I believe it's being sold for 1.8 million. That may be up for negotiation. And so the very best next thing to do is to visit the property and to assess it with your contractors and to get an estimate, because it's definitely in need of reconstruction. You would have to introduce new building materials to that property to get it up to standard. And from my vantage point, all of the units are not ADA compliant, meaning they need to have accessibility features for the elderly. So this property is right to the back of you right now. It is 66 units, and it's possible that you can pursue this property with the funding in addition to the 90% if you have reserves in-house. The one hurdle that you must overcome is you must have a 501c3 applicant that applies. So if you have a trusted 501c3 partner that you can identify for them to be the applicant, and then you have an agreement, a legal binding agreement with them as to what that partnership will entail, then it could be a very viable option for you.
The biggest plus with this is definitely the operational money.
That's
I mean, that's tremendous.
tremendous.
That's
And the larger property you take on, the greater that benefit
I
becomes.
mean, that is wonderful, but there's, like I say, we're not even a 501c3, so we wouldn't even have time. I mean, if we could get it, there's not even time to handle that piece of it, probably at this point.
It's possible, because when you're in my field, which is a grant writer, a week to write a grant is nothing. I live off of hard deadlines, so, but it's for everyone's comfort level. Someone's very comfortable working really hard to meet a 1 week deadline, 2 week deadline.
Well, I can write a grant in a week too, but when you look at 90% match, that's,
Well, if you already have cash,
yeah.
then that's
But
just,
90% is a lot. 90%.
yes,
I've
So-
never done a grant for 90% match.
you've never. So it's definitely an investment, and then you have to consider, well, I'm giving this for a return of whatever
It's
percentage.
definitely worth it. I mean, if you've got the upfront money, to get that operational money guaranteed for that, that's a wonderful thing.
Or you could definitely take your time, get a partner on board, and then comfortably go in after it next year, if they happen to change the requirements around, because there's no telling what they'll do next year, so.
Yes.
If I may, thanks for a great presentation. If you have cars, because we need to know you as a grant writer. I can't speak for the board, but this may not be the best opportunity for us at this point, but I think the value was to hear what the possibilities are, and hopefully they're prepared for the next go around.
The value is just to plant that seed, it will germinate somewhere. So if you don't have.
It was germinating until you talked about the 90%.
No Roundup in these.
Yes. Everyone wants to lose weight until they have to go to the gym, so.
That's the app response.
Yeah.
So commissioners elect Commissioner have, any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
evening.
And if you do have, concerns, I have your information in the email, but please, leave it for us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Commissioners, that was, Rob.